Greetings, urban farmers, gardeners, and healthy food visionaries. Farmer Greg here, and welcome to the 614th episode of the Urban Farm Podcast, where every day we work together to educate and inspire you to become part of your food revolution. Stay tuned for the most amazing deal on bulk seeds and seed-saving education you have ever seen. A few years ago, our team created an event called the Great American Seed Up, where we pack hundreds of people into a room over a few days to scoop amazing open pollinated and heirloom seeds for their gardens and collections. We came up with the scoop your own model because the majority of the cost of seeds is actually in the packaging and distribution. So by eliminating these costs, people can buy seeds at bulk pricing. Well, as you can imagine, packing hundreds of people into a room is not feasible these days, so we had to get creative. We came up with the seed up in a box. And what's amazing about it is that now you can get these bulk seeds wherever you are in the world. We've chosen seeds that are popular, non-GMO, open pollinated, and easy to grow. They're bundled 10 jumbo packs per variety, so you can share them with your community, family, church, or school. Your job is to split them into individual packages. Our job is to make them as inexpensive as possible, and right now, they're averaging about 60 cents per individual jumbo portion. With all the uncertainty in the world, a lot of people are thinking about how we can make our future more food secure. Seed Up in a Box is a great way to do this because each bundle has enough seeds and education so that you may never have to purchase seeds again. This is an amazing deal, and I am so excited for the opportunity to take the Great American Seed Up all around the world via our Seed Up in a Box. Learn more about Seed Up in a Box and get your own bundle by going to greatamericanseedup.org. That's greatamericanseedup.org. Today on our podcast, we have someone who looks outside the box for garden growing. We're talking with Jenn Frymark about growing fresh and closer to home. Jenn is the Chief Greenhouse Officer of Gotham Greens, a pioneer in urban indoor agriculture with a national network of local high-tech farms. At Gotham Greens, Jenn oversees all greenhouse design and growing operations. Prior to Gotham Greens, she managed greenhouses at McMurdo and South Pole stations in Antarctica, providing fresh vegetables for U.S. research scientists. How cool is that? She also worked in the greenhouse at the Cuisinart Resort and Spa in Anguilla and designed and led operations for the Science Barge in New York City. Jenn earned her master's degree in plant sciences from the University of Arizona and a bachelor's degree in plant biology from Arizona State University. Welcome to the show today, Jenn. Are you ready to rock?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's long overdue.
Oh my gosh, that is such the case. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to get where you're at today?
Yes, absolutely. And what's so fun about getting to do this podcast with you is in a lot of ways my story starts with you.
Isn't that fun?
Which is just, I think, just a testament to how much like the work you've done has inspired so many people and certainly myself. So
well, thank you.
I really, a lot of the launch of my career started with you. And so, I mean, I can just start with that story. We were at ASU together, and I was sort of floundering and bouncing around majors and trying to decide what I would do.
This was
I'm trying to think what year this would have been, 1998, 1999?
Yep,
maybe?
99. That's when I started at ASU.
Okay, because that would have been my third year there already, second year. And so we took an organic gardening class together.
In August.
Yes, and I've always been a strong math science person, right? So I knew it was going to be something in the sciences that I did and was just, took that as an elective, and I loved it. It was my first experience really working with plants, and you and I had that class was based, yes, there was classroom time, but we were also based out at the farm at South Mountain.
Yep.
And we had that class out there, and I remember the day that we had to, prep this field plot, and it was scorching hot.
Yeah, in August.
You and I just bonded. There was this field, and they were like, all right, we're going to teach you guys double digging. And I think the whole rest of the class just like
Stood,
were so wimpy, and they just couldn't. They're like, we can't do it. And you and
yeah.
I did the whole thing together.
Yeah, I think they stood back and watched us.
Yes. And I just like the bond between us was instantly formed. We were both really passionate about it, and we were both really hard workers. So I think, you know, you and I began our relationship, you know, in that class. But because of it, like, you know, we worked so much together during that class and at the farm, and just became friends, you know. And you had the urban farm going at your place, and I just started getting involved. You started teaching me about permaculture, fruit trees, I mean, everything, you know, and just really, in a lot of ways, when I was just a new plant lover, I guess, I feel like in a lot of ways you really took me under your wing and exposed me to so much. And it was like you were the first person that really showed me that there was a career path with plants.
Well, so hold on here. I'm tearing up a little bit. I had no idea. You were just my friend.
Yeah.
You were just my friend back then. I had no idea that I was having that impact on you.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
that's the thing. It's like you never know what's happening when you interact with people, you know? So it's just so important. You're always, and I think of that like even with my kids too, even when you're not teaching, you're teaching. Like everything you're doing is just influencing people around you. And so, yeah, you were just such a huge influence on me, and I'm eternally grateful for it. So then from there, you know, I think even like with you and other people in the Phoenix area, I started doing so much. I mean, you connected me. I ended up with so many jobs in college because of you and people I met with you, probably more than the average person. But, you know, we were working together on projects with the urban farm or fruit trees. And I started doing school garden programs. You and I were doing curriculum for charter schools. I started working with Salvation Army, doing garden programs for them. I was working at another woman's like herbalism company doing herb gardens for her. I was working, you know, in some other kitchen gardens. There was just so much going on in the Phoenix area too. It was very exciting. And, you know, so from that and working with plants, I think how I got to, you know, Gotham Greens, another just real turning point in my career path was, you know, I was at ASU, had switched the major to plant biology at this point, was working with plants, and, you know, it was all education related, most of the job. And there was, you know, schools asking for, you know, garden programs or garden beds, but they didn't have outdoor space. So then I was like, I'm going to have to learn another way, because plants are just such a great way to teach kids. You can teach almost any lesson. You can teach about science, you know, environmental stewardship, math. You can teach health, nutrition. I mean, you can really build an amazing program around plants. And so I remember seeing an advertisement for a conference that was happening at University of Arizona in Tucson, and it was on hydroponics for the classroom. That conference doesn't exist anymore, but they ran it for many years then. So yeah, this still would have been, I guess, maybe the late 90s, 2000, maybe a little bit later. And so I went to this conference, and I mean, it was at the Controlled Environment Ag Center at U of A. And again, I was just sort of thinking how I would apply this to classrooms in Phoenix. But the second I walked into one of these greenhouses, they're teaching greenhouses, and saw the tomatoes growing, you know, 20 feet up into the air, I was so inspired. And I just knew, sometimes it's just like something presents itself in your life, and you just know that's the door to walk through, you know. And I had that experience at this conference. It was just so clear what the next part of the journey was. And so after going to that conference, you know, I was graduating now from ASU, and had to decide what's next. And again, is like just, you know, my love for plants. I kind of had a lot of irons in the fire. You know, I had thought about going to naturopathic med school.
Oh, I remember that.
I was also applying at the time to Michael Moore's School for Botanical Medicine in Bisbee, because I was very interested in that path. But then, you know, with this, I said, I'm going to go to grad school for plant sciences at U of A. And yeah, so right after that conference, I applied. I started interviewing, meeting with professors there, and then was able to start there pretty soon after. And moved down to Tucson to do my graduate work there.
I remember that.
So yeah, I mean, being there, I mean, it was such an amazing place. What's really, you know, great about the Controlled Environment Ag Center at U of A is, you know, that center is half plant science and half biosystems engineering. So it was such a unique perspective in this, you've got both sides of it, because when you're growing plants in greenhouses, it's a little bit different. There's some different variables. There's a lot of equipment you're running. There is a lot of engineering and design. And so you have faculty from both of those perspectives. So even though my major was in plant sciences, there was so much engineering involved. And just being a grad student there was so much fun. They have so many different greenhouses at the center. And there's, so many research projects going on, so many different students and people to interact with. And you're all just helping each other. There was such a sense of community. So I might have had my own research projects that were on sensors and controls and growing basil, field versus outdoor production, some photosynthesis studies. I had a lot of my own research projects, but then you're also helping your fellow students, and you're working on tomato projects and peppers and other equipment installations. So you really get your hands dirty. You build some greenhouses from the ground up. So you get to see some greenhouse construction. You set up new control systems. There was just so much exposure to everything. And they also did a great job, connecting students with, industry and networking events. So you started to kind of see like what you could do post, graduation also as career paths.
Nice. Well, and I remember coming down and visiting you a couple of times down there and seeing some of your epic greenhouses.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I remember even you coming down there too and us seeing some, other really great farms on the way. A few come to mind of us like getting to like pick saguaro fruits and really seeing I think people can be surprised what like a food forest Sonoran Desert can be.
Right. So then something happened and it was after you graduated and all of a sudden I hear from you and you're in Antarctica. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think I've had a lot of like extreme environment farming experience. I definitely have not had a traditional farming career path, even though it all has been farming related. So when I was at U of A, the director of the center at the time and someone on my graduate committee was Gene Giacomelli, and he had the NSF and Raytheon contract at the time to build a new growth chamber for South Pole. And so in Antarctica, they have, there's a couple U.S. bases in Antarctica. And I mean, just like, where there's people, they want fresh food, and so over the years, people had just like built all these kind of like hobby makeshift greenhouses in different bases. And they all were using hydroponics, which is what I had just gone to school for, because the Antarctic Treaty says that no country can bring their own soil to Antarctica.
Oh, wow.
So if people wanted to grow food there, they automatically started using hydroponics. Now, the NSF was building a new South Pole station at the time that I was in graduate school because all the old domes were getting buried by snow. And so as part of it, they said, let's build a real food production chamber down here, not just these hobby ones that people are putting in closets and places and sheds to try to grow some food. Because what happens in Antarctica is half the year it's summer down there and, the bases are open. Planes are flying in. There's a fresh food supply coming in, right? But in winter, so opposite of us, when it's summer here, it's winter there. But that's 6 months of the year. The sea ice freezes about 50 miles out, and it's too cold for the plane hydraulics. So you are really isolated at this time. And so there's no fresh food people are eating. It's just either frozen, dried, canned foods that you're relying on. And so, it was people started growing food. They wanted fresh food. And also there's no vegetation in the South Pole. So
right.
It's very dry. There's no humidity. There's no smells. And so there was a couple of reasons for the NSF to want to put some real food production systems there. It was to have fresh fruits and veggies during winter for the people that were stationed there, but also for the psychological benefits, because they know plants are so important to people.
Right.
And so this food growth chamber was designed so there was the food production area, but then there was a glass wall, and they almost built like a living room on the other side of it so that people could just hang out and also enjoy the space.
Wow,
and
really?
Be around plants and the humidity and smell everything. Yeah, and so University of Arizona had the contract to build this, and led by Dr. Gene Giacomelli. And this was going on the side while I was a grad student. So I was always over there and seeing what they're building and talking with them. And, then it got close to ship the unit down. And so a lot of the Raytheon team was coming in, and, I had just done a master's degree that had a lot to do with the control system that was installed in this unit. And so I was writing manuals of how it was going to operate and training the Raytheon team how to operate this thing. And both U of A and Raytheon, as I'm doing these trainings, they're like, you're going down there, right?
Oh,
And
really?
I was like, there's no way. I'm terrified. I'm going to fall in a crevasse. I don't like the cold. It was not for me. But I got convinced. And so after it went down, I went and did a summer season down there. And I was going back and forth between McMurdo, which had sort of its own kind of cobbled together greenhouse, and then helping get the new one going at South Pole, flying back and forth, running both stations and teaching people how to grow, which was just so cool. And we were growing everything down there. We had all sorts of greens, salad greens, bok choys, dark greens. We had tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers. I mean, we were growing things like stevia for sweeteners. We were growing all sorts of herbs. I mean, you name it. We had everything growing down there.
They must have just loved you.
It was really a lot of fun. I mean, what an experience. And I only did a summer season. I think, they would have liked me to stay a winter, but when I was there for the summer, the sun just went around in a circle all day long, and the sun never set. And, then it gets down to the horizon, and I knew it was about 6 months of winter coming up, and I was like, I think I'm good. I think you're trained, summer. I'm gonna go back home. Yeah.
Wow. And then Anguilla. So I just want to revisit real quick here, though. I was with you this whole way. We were not like physically with you, but we were communicating. We were chatting back and forth via email this whole time. And so I have this memory of you being in these places. And so then you're out in an island somewhere.
Yeah, and that was actually during my graduate program. So there's someone named Howard Resch who wrote a book called Hydroponic Food Production, which for so many years was like the only book out there on, hydroponic crop production, and the real go-to resource for a lot of people. And I knew this book, had read this book, and kind of looked up to him as an idol. And he came and spoke at U of A. And at the end of his talk, he's always been a consultant, but he was also running this greenhouse in the Caribbean in Anguilla for Cuisinart, with similar, intentions as some of the South Pole project, and that, in the Caribbean, like a lot of food is brought in by barge, and there's a lot of fresh veggies that just there's a lot of things you don't see in the grocery store there. And the Cuisinart Resort had 5 restaurants, and there was just so many perishable items they wanted to serve that they just couldn't get. So they're like, we're going to have to grow it ourselves for our guests. So Howard had gone down there, and he built this facility and ran it. And again, it grew everything. So at the end of Howard's talk at U of A, he said, I'm really open to hosting students and having you come down for an internship. I was like, this is for me. So I ran up to him.
Right.
At the end of the talk, I had his book. I'm like, you need to sign my book and sign me up. And so I had to figure it all out, and I was really fortunate. U of A was so accommodating to help me do it as a research assistantship, and to take a semester during my graduate work and get, credit and working it out with Cuisinart. So Cuisinart, I got to stay like in their 5-star resort on the beach, working for Howard, and was still enrolled in U of A. It was just such a wonderful situation, and just a different perspective, because again, I just got a chance to grow everything. We had, so many different growing systems. We had ponds for the greens. We had Dutch buckets for vine crops. We had different vertical towers for, strawberries and herbs and some of the dark greens. Beds, just growing beds filled with, peat-based medias for beans. I mean, we grew everything there. So again, with Howard, I got a lot of, training on, how to manage so many different kind of crops in a commercial setting, how to manage all the crop scheduling and, to meet the resort's demand needs. So it was such a valuable experience. And so that was actually before South Pole, because that was during grad school, and then South Pole was right after.
Oh, very good. Very good. Wow.
And then again, from the U of A connections, I got off the ice, and another professor of mine from U of A, Merle Jensen, who's very well known in the whole greenhouse and hydroponics world, he called me and said, there's these people that they want to build an environmental education center on a barge in New York City. They want to put a couple of greenhouses on it, and you got to be the one that gets this job.
Wow.
So it's great. I mean, I'm from New York. My whole family was in New York City. So I'd just gotten off the ice and, went and met them. And it was New York Sunworks, which is still an organization that's changed form so much since, this project. But at that time, New York Sunworks was focused on building this Science Barge. And so I was able to go be the greenhouse director for that project. And we built this whole facility. We had a couple of greenhouses on the barge. We powered it with solar panels, wind turbines. We had a generator that ran on biofuels, and we got it all from the waste oil from local area restaurants to power that. The water, we had a rainwater catchment system off the greenhouse. We had an RO system where we could purify the Hudson River water if we needed to. We had constructed wetlands on the barge if there were any wastewater streams. And then we designed a curriculum and went around and did like a tour program around Manhattan for 2 years for different schools. And we docked it at different piers. It was an awesome project. Wow. And that's about as urban farming as you can get on a barge on piers around Manhattan.
Yeah. Well, and I actually came out to New York. I spent 5 days in New York and hung out with you on the barge and checked that out. That was awesome.
Yeah, and so now, I mean, I believe the Science Barge was donated, and there is another group running it, and New York Sunworks over the years has morphed into more of, it builds, the organization builds science classrooms and hydroponic science labs like all over at New York City schools. So it's really great to see what they've built and done since then.
Okay, now, the creme de la creme on the whole game. How'd that happen?
Yes. Yeah, and so after that, I met, Viraj and Eric through the Science Barge and being in New York. And, the two of them are the ones who are much more entrepreneurial, and they really wanted to start a business. And there were so many reasons. Well, I mean, I guess we started this, over 10 years ago. Gotham Greens has been running for 10 years, selling produce for 10 years. But the three of us got together about 12 years ago because it took, a little time to get the business going and get the first greenhouse built. But again, they were very entrepreneurial, interested in food production, and just saw this as a compelling business opportunity. We could see the products that were in, say, Whole Foods and New York City, and we just thought, like, let's see if we can grow this locally
Nice.
and sell to these stores and restaurants right in Manhattan. And so, yes, I mean, what's been great about Gotham Greens is, the three of us have such different skill sets, so we could put that all together to build this company. And so, Eric is our CFO and knew how to raise the money and, handle all the finance for the company. And Viraj is our CEO and works on all, business development and sales and marketing and these other parts of the business. And then I could really focus on the technology and work on the greenhouse design and how to grow everything. And so we were such a good team. And so we got our first greenhouse built in 2011, and that greenhouse is on the roof of a building in Brooklyn. And, at first we knew we wanted to build an urban farming company. And then there's so many decisions to make. How big is it going to be? Where are you going to put it? How are you going to finance it? What equipment are we going to use? And we knew what we wanted to do was provide year-round food in New York City. So New York has a very cold winter climate. So we knew we needed a greenhouse, right? We wanted to be able to grow year-round because we wanted to be able to sell to big retailers and keep our shelf space all year round. So we knew we wanted a greenhouse. And so at that point, we were really moving into controlled environment agriculture. And certainly that's what my background was in, and using greenhouses and hydroponic systems, which we can talk more about. But we ended up on the roof because, in New York City, we were looking all over the place. Where are we going to put this farm? And, what we were doing is we wanted to build something. We wanted to see if it was a viable business. Could this be a profitable business that stands alone? There had certainly been plenty of other examples of food production in New York City. I think, we can say that the reason cities exist is because of agriculture, right? And so cities and food go together. But a lot of the existing, farms, I guess, in New York were either educational or more community-based, right? And so they might be relying on some other external source of funding to operate. And we were like, no, we really just want to see if this is a viable business on its own that doesn't need grant money or something. So that was such a focus of the business. And, we were looking around and we needed, because of greenhouses, we knew we were going to go into something that was a bit capital intensive. And we needed light, right? Like I am so interested in picking the right level of technology. And that's not an easy thing to choose, right? It depends on the geography, where you're growing, what you want to grow. I want to be as close to nature as possible while leveraging some of the very interesting technologies that we have today, but without removing too much of nature, right? So I really wanted to use the sun, and for that to be our primary energy source. And so we needed a place in the city that wasn't going to be shaded all the time, especially if you're going to build an expensive greenhouse. So, most of New York City is like very tall buildings. And so as you're looking for sites on the ground, not only are they shaded, but it's a very expensive real estate investment. Like we're like new farmers trying to grow, salads in New York City. So, we ended up on the roof because it just worked out. Is like, that's where we could be sure we'd get the light. And that's where, it was a better real estate deal for us too. So our first greenhouse, we had it up and running in 2011. We were on the roof of a building, and that was a retrofit. So we put this greenhouse on an existing building. So there's a lot to think through. I mean, it was now these things, there's precedent for what we're doing. And there's so many businesses with similar business models to what we started. And there's now even precedent in building code for what we're doing. But when we were starting this, 12 years ago, like it was very new. We were very pioneering, and everyone thought we were crazy. They were like, how, so getting these things permitted, finding the buildings that you could use, like it was not easy. And so it was so exciting when we got this up and running. And, very quickly after having the first one built, we could see instantly that it was a good business idea. And so we built the second one. And the second one we built, Whole Foods had reached out and said, hey, we're building a new building. We're remediating a brownfield in Gowanus, Brooklyn. And we would really like to, they were building the first ever LEED Platinum grocery store, and they wanted to put our greenhouse on the roof of their building. And we were so excited about the opportunity.
How did that make you feel?
It's just so exciting just to see. It was the buy-in that like this was a good idea, and that there was it, because it started as like, our idea, and then you're trying to like start a fire, right? And you're like, is there something there? But like when there's a request from someone else and a partner like that to build it, you're like, no, the world wants this. It's like a request, like asking for more, not like you trying to like push your way anymore, So it just was so exciting. And so we built that second one with Whole Foods on their grocery store. And then after that, the company has changed so much over the years of like level of technology, size of the greenhouses, where we're growing. We built a third one in New York City. And just so quickly, every greenhouse, we're just at capacity, sold out. There's so much demand in the marketplace. And then after having 3 facilities up in New York City, we were ready. We just felt that, we had learned how to build the greenhouses. We learned how to run the business. We now knew how to run 3 different facilities. So we're already starting to become a bit decentralized. And we said, let's do another city. We're ready. And then Chicago ended up being the next city because we all had connections to that city. And it fit a lot of the criteria that were, part of why we started the business. It had a cold winter climate, so we could use, the production equipment we were using for year-round growing. It had a very large population and a big market. And then it was just very serendipitous that at the same time we started looking into other cities, Method had reached out to us, which they have all the eco-based cleaning products.
Oh, yeah.
And their original founders were still running the company at that point. And they were building a manufacturing facility in the south side of Chicago, building the first ever LEED Platinum manufacturing facility. And the, architect was William McDonough, and I'm sure you're familiar with the book Cradle to Cradle.
Oh, yes.
So he was the architect on the project. They were building this very inspiring, LEED Platinum manufacturing facility, and said, hey, you want to put a greenhouse on the roof of this building? And it was perfect, and so we built that project. And again, that was a larger one. Now that greenhouse was 75,000 square feet. And so the facilities were getting bigger. We were adding more automation. And then after that, we were operating in 2 cities, and we just felt really good about the business at that point. And we have scaled so much over the last couple of years. So now, and started to move sites to the ground, because we really were always focused on being close to the consumer in an urban environment. But once you get out of some of these very large cities like New York, you can have a greenhouse on the ground and be an urban farm without with maybe more favorable real estate prices or without the risk of a lot of like skyscrapers shading your property, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up building another one in Chicago next door to the first project. We put 100,000 square feet on the ground there. We built another greenhouse in Providence, Baltimore, opened another in Denver, and our latest is now just about finished in Davis, California.
What?
And then there's always, of course, like a pipeline of projects, behind that. So we are just growing like crazy, which is so exciting.
Why Davis, California? That's a long way from New York City.
Yes. And this is just what's so interesting is, the business changes over time. And what, originally was looking at this local supply chain, and that so much of the production was coming from California, and we were looking at disrupting the supply chain. How could we, be in the East Coast or these other regions where there wasn't food production and grow it right there? Like at first you'd think, why would you ever build in California? That's like the salad bowl of the country. But it turns out that over, the last decade, the interest in indoor farming and controlled environment agriculture, there are some different drivers that make this a compelling business opportunity, even in California. And I would say there's two pieces of that. One is food safety. And so I think there have been some very big food safety events and recalls over the last decade related to field production. And, the distribution of these products is very complicated. It's a very decentralized system. There's so many players. You have the growers and then different harvest crews and then different packers, shippers, and brokers. And so there's issues with traceability, and that makes it very hard to recall lots. And so when there's an outbreak, they just say, pull everything off the shelf because we don't know where it came from. Whereas we're completely vertically integrated. We have less risk than a field grower. We also have, we have such a robust food safety program at Gotham Greens. And, because we're vertically integrated, because we have less risk than a field grower that might have like water sources coming from other areas that could be contaminated, a lot of these risks are minimized in this kind of production system. And so food safety has made leafy greens production, which had some of the worst recalls in the last decade. It's very interesting to do this in, protected environments. Mm-hmm. And so there's that. And then the other driver is just some of the environmental benefits. It can use so much less land. So, we're using like 95% less water than a field grower would to produce the same yield. We're using, I should have these numbers at my fingertips. I want to say we're using 35, it would be like 35 times more land if we were in field production. I might be getting those numbers wrong. I'm not. But it is, and if you look at, the land use, water use, that we can put these facilities anywhere on non-arable land, like on a vacant lot. We can redevelop brownfields. There's a lot of other environmental drivers that make this business work, even in California.
Wow.
Especially in California, even due to, there's a lot of issues with labor shortages, food safety, water availability. So all of these things, and now I think we're moving from, just being this disruptor, on the East Coast to just really being like a part of the way food is grown.
Wow. That is truly epic. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It has been an exciting and very busy ride.
And it's, in many ways, it feels to me like you were blessed all along the way with the right opportunity at the right time, and you just saw it and took it.
I couldn't agree more. And I would say, what is the quote? It's like the guy, Louis Pasteur, that invented fermentation. He has this quote that says, chance favors the prepared mind. And I think, that I am very grateful for some of the luck that we've received along the way, and just like being ready to take advantage of it when those doors opened, and like just having done the legwork to be ready.
Yeah. Well, I'm so proud of you for what you've created. I've always been excitedly standing on the edges watching you as you process through this. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You used a word that I want to define before we move on, and that's vertically integrated. Can you tell us what that means?
Sure. are. So in our case, we're all the parts of the supply chain, are under our roof, which is different than a lot of field production, conventional field production. So I'm growing all the plants, I'm bringing in the seeds and some inputs, but I'm growing everything on site. I'm packaging everything on site, and I'm the distributor to the customer. And typically that can be many, many different groups for large field operations.
Got it. So you guys handle everything.
Yes.
From seed to delivery.
Yep. And that helps us just handle to not have all the losses that happen. There's, if you read now, I think it's something like 40% of the food in this country is wasted from this very complicated supply chain, and waste at every level, whether it's the farm and then the packers and the processors, shelf life lost along this long distribution chain. And then the shopper gets only a couple days of shelf life on their product, and things go bad in their fridge. So by us controlling that and being local, we can, really take advantage of that and deliver a very fresh product of the highest quality, and pass all that shelf life on to the end consumer and help reduce food waste. And I think that's become the more interesting piece. I feel like when we started, a decade ago, food miles was a really big buzzword. And I don't know that has turned out to be true. I don't know that is the real driver of why local food can be better for the environment. I think it has a lot more to do with this food waste. And if you think about how much, because even if you talk about food waste, if 40% of the food is wasted because of this supply chain, and you're losing all the shelf life of these fresh perishable products, you're throwing all that energy out the door too that went into that, and all the water use that went into that, that's not being actually consumed as calories anymore. So I think that is what really makes the local production so compelling.
Well, and there's the complete other side of the coin, which is it's fresher, it's healthier for you.
Yes, and that you're not losing, the nutrition can degrade over time, and, we can really just grow everything in like an optimal conditions in our greenhouses.
Awesome. And where do people find out more about Gotham Greens?
Great. So you can find more at GothamGreens.com, and we certainly have very active social media accounts too. So you can look at Instagram, Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. On our website too, there are all different links about for different inquiries, and you will reach the right team through email addresses on the website.
Nice. So I'm going to shift on you, and I'd like for you to talk about a time you failed, how you overcame that failure, and what you might have learned from it.
So I don't know if a very particular event comes to mind, except that I get a lot of things wrong all the time. I get a lot right, but like anyone knows, just building a business, you get a lot wrong too. So, I think, something that comes to mind is we've had plenty of projects along the way that just never happened. You start working on a site and just something goes wrong, and you just find out something in the engineering far enough down the road that, you can't do it. And it's really hard when it feels like a project doesn't make it to the finish line. And so that's why, Gotham Greens, we have always been so careful to not say we're going to build greenhouses everywhere, or say how many, or announce projects too early. We very much just we wait until it's almost open to announce it, because, there's things that have just, come up over the years, and plenty of things just of building the company, and what's the right way to build the company, and the organizational structure, and how do you make sure that everything's standardized. There's so many things that we try, and if it doesn't work, you just try again. I think that's it. You just keep trying again when something doesn't work until you find the right way.
Right. And this is really the reason I asked this question. Is it's not really a failure, it's a learning lesson.
Yes, absolutely.
And what do you consider your biggest success?
I think that sitting here, 10 years later, that Gotham Greens made it is a huge success.
Nice.
And just that the business made it, because I was even looking this up, because there's all these people make all these statements of what percentages of business fail. And so I was looking it up, and I read that 20% of businesses fail in the first year, and by year 10, 70% of businesses fail. Those are the most recent statistics. And just to be standing here over a decade later with a business thriving is such a huge success.
Oh, amen to that. Congratulations. And what drives you?
I really love plants. So I think that is my driver. I love plants, and I'm super inquisitive person. And so every new chapter of the company is just an opportunity for learning and to like dig in deeper and learn more about something else. So all things plants, I can learn more about plant physiology. How can I grow them better? How can I get better yields, better quality? How can I grow more with less and use less resources using technology, data, plant science? Yeah, so I think I'm just like very rooted in plant science.
I can see that. And if you could recommend one book, and I hear maybe you have two for our listeners, what would they be and why?
So I would recommend two books. One, I would recommend The Nature Fix by Florence Williams. I tell everyone to read this book. I think it's inspirational to just see all the benefits of spending more time in nature. So it's a very plant-focused book, but I think it could inspire people to just realize how important it is to have just like wild space and how all the benefits, psychological, physical, of spending time in nature. So that is one I would recommend. And the other I would recommend that has helped me so much to become a better leader and to better use my skills is actually a personality test and book called Strengths Finder 2.0. And you take this, short test and it gives you your top 5 strengths. And I have taken a lot of personality tests over the years, and this is the best one I've ever taken. And the whole premise of the book and what I find inspiring about it is that it's, not trying to tell you to be well-rounded. It's like notice what you're good at and then like go for it. So again, if I think about my kids, if, like my son's like very good at math, and it makes me think like, don't get him the, English tutor, get him the math tutor, like go after what you're really good at.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And what one final piece of advice do you have for our listeners?
I would say, even related to recommending the book, The Nature Fix, I would say everyone should spend much more time outdoors in nature. We spend far too much time inside. So many of us are very sedentary, working on our computers, in the office all day. And we have so much to learn from nature. It's a great way to relax, and it's a great way to spend time with people. I mean, everything we've seen during the pandemic, it's a very safe space to spend time with other people right now. And I just think you can get a lot of ideas from that kind of unstructured environment, and even just thinking about biomimicry and what little tips you're going to learn walking through a forest and what the plants can teach you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Jenn. It has been an absolute delight.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me, Greg.
Absolutely. And how can our listeners get a hold of you?
I think the best way is through the Gotham Greens website, or probably the easiest is to find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And that's gothamgreens.com?
Yep, you got it.
Awesome. Thank you. And you can find show notes from today's podcast at urbanfarm.org/Gotham Greens.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.